Alright guys, so by this point in this adventure, you are probably not surprised to know that I am running out of library audiobooks. And what do I mean by that? I mean that when I started this adventure, I was searching mostly by topic, right, from my library's audiobooks. I was searching for books first on presidents and then, the Revolutionary War or Watergate or whatever. And so I would comb through and I would essentially listen to all of those audiobooks. Well, this project's been going on for over 5 years, and audiobooks only come out so fast. So today I have a selection of supplementals that I basically read because of hype. So these are books that someone told me about, I read a review somewhere, and for many of these I was like, oh, I don't know if I will enjoy that, but since it is out there and it exists and I need something new, I will put it on hold and I will check it out. So all but one of these is a new release from this year. I think the oldest one is from February 22. So maybe you have heard of these, maybe you haven't, maybe you read them, maybe you haven't, but all of these were books that I took a chance on because they were new and I needed a book to put on hold. Except for the first one that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to start with this really briefly because I did a whole review on this and more. So the hype around this one was not that it was new, but that it is a documentary on Netflix, and I was reading it for the project that I've spoken about that I'm doing with a friend about religion and politics. So that is The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism at the Heart of American Power by Jeff Sharlet. So again, I did a whole book to documentary review about this where I talked not only about the book, but I also talked about how they then translated the book to the documentary. The book originally came out in 2008, 2009, and the documentary I believe was from about 2019. So again, it's not new, but this was actually the first time it had come across my Netflix algorithm. For whatever reason, it just decided to show up there. It is a Netflix documentary, and we were reading this for our project. The short version, if you don't want to go and watch that entire review, is that this is Jeff Sharlet's story about a religious political organization called The Family. That is one of their names, and Jeff actually ended up at one of their induction houses as he was a younger person and he was interested in looking at religion in America. A friend came to him and said, hey, my brother has potentially joined a cult. You look into religion and this kind of stuff. Can you go and see what's going on? And so Jeff ended up joining and beginning this journey that has really made a huge impact in his career. The Family is the first of several books he's written about the family and its offshoots. While it starts very autobiographical with his time at this house called Ivanwald, really backs up to the beginnings of fundamental Christianity right at the beginning of America's lifetime and brings it all the way forward. The middle sections can be a little bit long. There's a lot of history, and the history sections, they are either devoid of the literary quality that makes the introduction very interesting, or he tries to use that literary style in ways that it doesn't really work with, for me anyway, the historical nonfiction story that he's telling. So the middle section is very long, it's a little bit weird, but there is no denying that the Family as an organization is something that has a lot of power in Washington and has a lot of power globally. This is a global organization and a very particular form, their own form really, of Christianity. So it's really interesting. This one is definitely more political than religious, even though Jesus and Christianity is the basis of this group, but it's, for me at least, much more interesting for all the political stuff. So you can watch my review for more on that and also the documentary if you would like to. So I've mentioned in a couple of these videos that I am searching for books that update what Rick Perlstein did in his fantastic books that chronicle the rise of conservatism in America because Rick Perlstein has like multiple 500 to 800 page books that are not just the story of a political movement, but also the story of a cultural movement. They're really dense, but they're just excellent. They get into every detail, but they stop when Reagan is elected, or at the very least, he's not published one past that yet. And the reason is often that Reagan is considered where this type of conservatism is mainstreamed. So for Rick Perlstein, like, he's done his job, right? He has chronicled the rise of it. Reagan is in office. So I've been looking for books that go past that. There is this one that came out this year, and while I wasn't sure, mostly because of the subtitle, if it would be what I would be interested in, I decided to read it because I had talked to some friends about it, and they were like, oh, I put that on my to-read list. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just put this on hold and see what happens. And so this one is Insurgency: How Republicans Lost Their Party and Got Everything They Ever Wanted. Now, again, with that subtitle, I'm always really cautious. Am I gonna just walk into just something that's being used to just like make noise and not actually convey information? Jeremy Peters is a journalist, and his point is that you can draw a direct line to the modern Republican Party and Trump, and he puts his point A, if you will, if Trump is point Z, his point A is Sarah Palin, and this rise of a very specific kind of conservatism / Republican Party that you can draw that line not quite 20 years. For me, I never would have considered starting at Sarah Palin. I don't really have, very firm memories of the first time that she really came to the national stage, honestly, outside of the Tina Fey impression on SNL, just because I've seen those clips on YouTube. And so I thought, well, this is really interesting. And what I enjoy particularly about Peters's book is that he interviews Republicans. So he talks historically, has contemporaneous accounts and quotations, but also he's interviewed some Republicans, either who the stories are about or who were on the ground, who worked for some of these people, who now, looking back at some of these past events, can they put them into context? It is, and again, you can tell from the subtitle, I would definitely not say that Jeremy Peters is a fan of the Republican Party. And just because I'm reading one right now that is like incredibly partisan in a way that I absolutely did not expect, I can tell that there has just been an effort made here, and I appreciate that. I do wish that it had not started quite so soon. I think that by starting with Palin, you miss some stuff from the 90s that I think is important to this story, but I read it, I enjoyed it, and by focusing on, Palin and what was happening there, it just, again, was resituating me in events that have happened in my lifetime, but I definitely was not very aware of as they were happening. So it did my updated version, if you will, by bringing us into like a life that I have been alive for. But it's still not Rick Perlstein. And I think the problem is that when you start with like a very A-grade book, everything else, and particularly stuff that deals with events that are still moving, it's just probably not going to do what I want it to do, but I'll keep trying. So skipping backwards in time, we are now going to talk about a memoir. And again, memoirs are so tricksy for me. They're not normally where I want to go with this. I prefer a more stereotypical nonfiction history text. I again saw some reviews on this book, and I had such great luck with my memoirs on Marie Yovanovitch and Fiona Hill that I thought, okay, I'll give this a try. So the book in question is Because Our Fathers Lied, a Memoir of Truth and Family from Vietnam to Today by Craig McNamara. And if that name, you're like, is that familiar? Craig McNamara is the son of Robert McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense under JFK and LBJ, and is one of the people considered the architects of the Vietnam War. And I thought it would be really interesting. Robert McNamara is not someone that I've done a lot of research on, and this period, I've mostly come at through the lens of JFK or the Kennedys, a little bit of LBJ, but not as much. So I thought that this would be a really interesting insight into this time in our history. However, this is much more memoir than it is anything else. And so basically, Craig McNamara, he grows up really venerating his father, but very quickly as he becomes a teen and things really start to ramp up with the Vietnam War, he comes to realize that he just doesn't really know who his father is, and they have a really hard time connecting. And Craig slowly becomes more liberal. And so there's like a big whole thing where he like takes a motorcycle trip and he ends up in Latin America, and he like lives in Chile for a while and is gonna join some of the revolutionary movements down there, and comes back, is like a farmer with sustainable farming. And so there's a lot of that. And really what this book is more about explaining anything, it's that Craig doesn't know. Craig doesn't know what his father is thinking. He doesn't know what his father's doing. And really, he has to find out that his father has lied about Vietnam along with the rest of the country. And he can never really get his dad to talk about it. And this feels like a stain on like him personally. And so at one point he even goes and he travels to Vietnam. So it's really interesting. It's an inversion of the story that I thought that we were going to get. If you are looking at this through a lens of like the political understanding more about like how and why Vietnam happens, you find the exact opposite in this book. So I don't even know if I would really recommend this unless that's the kind of like literary memoir that you're feeling. I definitely didn't get out of this what I thought I would, and I don't know, it's hard for me to review this because it is definitely not my thing. So then I moved on to another memoir that from the title I was sure wouldn't be my thing, and then I ended up giving 5 stars. So this is why when I saw this title and I saw who it was and I heard all the hype about it, I was like, I can't do another disappointing memoir title, but I took a chance and this one worked out. So this is The Flag, the Cross, and the Station Wagon. A graying American looks back at his suburban boyhood and wonders what the hell happened, by Bill McKibben. Now here's what I thought. I heard graying American looks back and wonders what the hell happened. And while I know that Bill McKibben is very involved in things like in activism and climate change and all that kind of stuff, for me, it's like a meme right now that millennials are ruining everything and like, oh, if only we could go back to this time, blah, blah, blah. And so I heard that title and I was like, is this just going to be about how millennials have wrecked everything again or something? But like I said, I had heard really good things. There was a lot of hype. And so I just took a chance and I dove in. This book has 3 major sections: the flag, the cross, and the station wagon. The flag is really interesting, at least for me, because he talks about growing up in Massachusetts and being some summers even a historical interpreter for American Revolution sites, museums, that kind of thing, and just being really imbued with that history. And so being imbued with a very specific type of patriotism, which as he grew older became much more complicated and much more, for him, sometimes even confused, and how he reconciles that early patriotism with the way that, the wars that we fought since then and all that kind of stuff. Because he situates it in American Revolutionary history and that kind of stuff, that was super interesting to me to hear how he grappled with that. I loved that. The cross was really interesting. Bill McKibben is quite religious, but in a way he says that religion belongs as a fringe movement. He really thinks that religion can do a great deal of good not at the center of an argument, but where it was, for example, in the civil rights movement, when people like Martin Luther King and other reverends were helping to push for social justice and change. And he believes that the church has a seat at the table, not the head seat, but a seat at the table. Specifically, he does stuff with religious groups and climate change, and truly does believe that the loss of the church as a community structure has had a negative impact on American cohesion. And so that was, again, really interesting. I'm not a religious person myself, but the way that he talked about it and the way that he sees his faith interacting with his social activism, very, very interesting. The station wagon, that one's a little bit less self-explanatory, I think. This is about economics and the difference between, the economic boom times in which he grew up, when everyone had a station wagon and everyone had a house and all that kind of stuff, to what is happening in our economics right now. That section is definitely a little bit more complicated, but again, economics not my thing, so maybe it's less complicated to other people, but I didn't think that it was as interesting as the first two sections, but those are two like hot button topics for me right now, so that may have been why. And then in the end, he has a call to action, but a very specific call to action for people of his generation. And he basically says explicitly that people of his generation have a duty to people of the generations that are younger than them. They can't just say, well, things were better back in my day and everything's going to pot. Like, people of his generation, unlike maybe me, they have more freedom. They maybe have stabler jobs, or potentially they've already reached retirement, and they can go and get arrested at a protest because it won't have as big an impact on like their job prospects as it would for someone who's younger. And so whatever you believe about all of that, it just felt really refreshing to, instead of, and you hear this all the time, like even in children's literature, like, oh, children will save the world, and like they have all the energy and they're going to mobilize. And while that's really important, I just really appreciated him saying, we still have a position on the stage of activism for whatever you want to be active about, and we need to stand up. Of course, specifically, he's Bill McKibben, so he talks a lot about climate change and climate activism, but I enjoyed that. And so that was one where I think the subtitle really tripped me up. I wasn't prepared for that, but I really liked it. I thought that was a memoir that worked for me. So it may work for you, it may not, but I'm really glad I bowed to the hype and took a chance on it. So finally, I want to talk about Incomparable Grace, JFK and the Presidency by Mark Updegrove. I feel like I have read so many books on JFK, and so when I saw that there was a new, quite short, I think it's just over 300 pages, book on JFK's entire presidency, I went into it kind of thinking, oh, well, this really isn't going to tell me stuff that I don't already know. But I live in Massachusetts, so of course, like when a new JFK book comes out, it's like a really big thing. And so I thought, oh, well, it's like a really short, comparably book, and so I'll check it out. So this is a moment of me being exactly correct in what I thought I was going to get. However, the medium made it special. And so what do I mean by that? What I mean is that this is exactly what it is billed as. It is a quick and succinct look at the JFK presidency. A little bit of his early biography, not much. Most of it's focused on his time in the White House. It touches on all the major themes, talks about like a little bit of new stuff that we've learned. Really, again, it's not going to hit much nuance, which I enjoy, but if you're just like, there is so much on JFK out there, I just want something very well written, something very succinct that will just get me through that presidency and just be interesting and not really bog me down. That is exactly what this book is, and it is written to be that and is that. So for me to say, oh, I didn't like it because it wasn't something it wasn't, I can't make that review, so I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to talk about the extra awesome feature of this, which is the audiobook. Now, the book itself quotes many of JFK's speeches, and I don't know if the book has as many long form quotes as the audiobook does. The reason that I'm not sure is because in the audiobook, when they reference a speech and a longer form quote from a speech, if there's audio of it, they actually give some of that audio to us. So you actually hear JFK giving his commencement address or his speech at American University. Like, you hear that, and that was so cool. Some of the other quotes, like for example, the inauguration speech, that I've heard, but some of this other stuff I haven't. And so it was a really extra excellent addition to the audiobook to actually get that information. And so while I probably could have done without reading this, so I could have gone either way, I didn't learn anything new necessarily, I did get that extra production value out of the audiobook, which was super cool. And so if you're on the fence about it and you're not sure, that might be something to put you over the edge. However, if you've got other stuff to read, you're pretty familiar with the JFK presidency, I don't think you need to read this book. Again, it's well written, it's succinct, it flows, it covers most of the big stuff. But again, if you're me and you've read multiple JFK books, it is what it is. And for what it is excellent. Just depending on what you're looking for, it might not be what you need. But oh my goodness, give me these audiobooks with these little extra additions. Oh, I am so here for it. I love it. Again, everything that I just talked about, except for The Family, has come out this year. So they are new releases you might be interested in. I had a mixed bag reaction to most of them. Like I said, The Family I enjoyed, but I also had the documentary. I was like half and half on my memoirs, so the Vietnam memoir didn't turn out to be that, and it was okay. But the Bill McKibben memoir ended up being way more interesting than I thought it would be, so that's like a 50-50 split. And then with Insurgency, it was kind of what I wanted, and then with the JFK book, it was exactly what it said it would be, and I just got the little added bonus of the audiobook production. So, believe it or not, I am actually behind on these supplemental videos. I could make a whole other 5-book video right now. I'm not going to do that, but I have some great 5-star books coming down the pike. I had some really good luck after this set, so I can't wait to bring those to you. I'm also working, like I said, on my actual presidential biographies. I'm in the middle of my William Henry Harrison right now, and so I am hopeful to have an actual president episode coming for you shortly. So thank you so much for hanging out during this. Drop me a comment down below if you have a recommendation or you read one of these. Just chat me. I love talking about nonfiction. So thanks, guys. Bye.